Hello, everyone. My name is Seth Dellinger, and this is going to be the first class in the series I'm offering, Biological Fitness. So what we'll be doing together in these classes is exploring awareness through movement lessons. This is from the Feldenkrais method. And what I want to say, just as sort of a general overview of the approach that I'm going to take with this idea of biological fitness, is that while each of the awareness through movement lessons we explore are designed to give you great benefit in the moment, right? As a result of taking the class, what I'm also very much hoping you will take away from these sessions is some ideas about principles of ideal movement that you can take with you throughout your day or into any other physical practice that you may have. Now, when I say ideal, this doesn't mean we're striving for perfection. We're striving to do everything correctly. And in fact, I will often be encouraging you in these classes to take a very exploratory approach where mistakes are part of the learning process. That's perfectly fine. But what we want to also understand is that just supposing we could move in an ideal way, and none of us actually can get to that state. Even if you're a gold medal Olympian, you're never completely ideal, right? But what would that state be? For example, how would you breathe in ideal movement? Well, we would just say simply that in ideal movement, your breath is free. So what that means is that if you are moving, you're doing something, right? And suddenly you hold your breath. In that moment where you hold your breath, something is a little bit less than ideal. And so if we are capable of noticing that, it just means that we can zero in on that moment as a moment when something could be improved, right? So then if we repeat the same action and the breath flows, we know already that something has been improved. So that's one example of a principle of ideal movement. So I will be trying to highlight those principles when they come up in the movement lessons that we're exploring together. Okay, so we can get into our very first lesson. And the lesson we're going to do is going to involve lying on the floor. So you'll want to have comfortable space where you can do that. If you need to put some padding down, that's fine. If you need any support under your head, make sure that it is a firm support. So don't put some pillow or anything squishy there, and really use the minimum amount that you need. A lot of people won't need anything behind the head. The point is your head is going to move during the process that we're going to explore. So you want to, you don't want to have something that too much behind the head will inhibit that movement. That's the main point. And most of these sessions are going to be about an hour long, including the time I'll take, like I'm doing now, to introduce what we're doing. But you know, it's as long as you can stay engaged, I think that you're going to get benefit from this. And I encourage you to stick through the entire process. If you find that your attention wanders at different points in the lesson, that's fine. In fact, there's going to be resting periods throughout. And this is partially designed to keep your attention fresh as you move through the process. Okay, I already mentioned lying on the floor. But if you are lying on the floor now, I'm going to ask you to come to stand in order to begin. Okay, so please come to stand. And what we're going to do here at the beginning is simply check in. So as you're standing, notice your comfort in standing. Could you stand for a lengthy period of time? Or do you sense somewhere in your body that probably would get tired or would start to complain after a time? Notice how you are distributing the weight over your feet. Would you say that the left leg and the right leg are doing equal work, or do you find that you're more to one side? Now, as I ask you these questions, you might think, uh-oh, my weight is to one side, I better fix that. Well, you can, but really what we're after here is, especially at the beginning, is just an awareness of what's already happening, right? Because if your weight is to one side, could be that's a habit, could be that that's how you tend to stand. If that's true, you want to know that, right? Before doing anything that might be corrective. So in any case, notice your weight, notice the quality of your breathing as you stand. And then just to put those two questions together, try shifting your weight deliberately now over one leg. The other foot can stay on the floor, but just shift over so most of the weight is through one leg. And notice how you breathe there. And then after a few breaths, do the experiment with your weight over the other leg, just to see if you notice a shift. You might not have thought of this before, but in fact, there is a very important relationship between your balance and your breathing. So most likely what you're finding is if you have a sense of more stability over one leg, probably the breath is easier over that leg as well. Okay. And now please just take kind of a leisurely walk through the space that you're in. And as you walk in particular, please bring your attention to your hip joints. Just notice how easily are you able to swing your legs as you walk. And connected to what you were looking at a moment ago, do you notice that you have a different experience when you step on one foot compared to the other? Some people will find that they actually kind of get taller over one leg, and on the other leg, it's as if they're a little bit shorter, kind of a small limp that many of us have. So if that's the case for you, again, please don't worry about it, but just observe that. Okay, and then come down to the floor and please rest on your back. And you can rest with your legs long if that's comfortable for you. If you have any discomfort in the low back especially, then you'll probably want to bend your knees and stand your feet to begin. But before we get into any movement, we're just going to rest here, but also, again, observe. So one of the main tools we're going to use in each of these classes for observation is how do you contact the floor? So there's a relationship you have with the floor. And just generally speaking, you can probably feel there's parts of your body right now that rest more clearly against the floor, and other places, not so much. Now, part of that is simply the shape of your body. For most people, there's not going to be any contact, the back of the neck or behind the ankles if your legs are long. Obviously, if your feet are standing, then your knees are up in the air. But in other parts of your body, you might feel that maybe on one side, there's clear contact. On the other side, not so much. So whether your legs are long or the feet are standing, just observe the way each of your legs or the soles of your feet contact the floor. Is there a sense that with one leg, there's more acceptance of the support of the floor? Maybe the other one, there's a small feeling almost like resisting giving in completely to support, almost like there's a little work somewhere happening in your body that's lifting that leg a little away from the floor. Notice the same thing when you pay attention to how your pelvis rests. Where do you feel pressure on the back of your pelvis? Is there more pressure to one side? Is one side a little lifted, as if the pelvis was rolling to the left or to the right? And then another place that sometimes you'll find a space between your body and the floor is the low back. In particular, if your legs are long. Compare the sensation on both the left and the right of your low back. Now, as we go along, you may be experiencing asymmetries. Again, this is fine. This is good information. And we're going to be working with the process of asymmetry a bit and what we're going to do. So again, resist any kind of temptation to correct yourself here. Only adjust if you need to for your comfort at this point. With your attention, move up along the line of your spine. Feel again if the weight of your back falls a little more heavily on one side. How do you experience the contact of your shoulder blades? Left shoulder blade, right shoulder blade. And notice also how your arms are resting. Where have you chosen to place your arms? And finally, notice the contact of the back of your head with the floor. Does your head rest on a point exactly between your two ears, or is your head actually turned slightly to one side? With one ear a little closer to the floor, the other one a little higher off the floor. Okay, and then to begin to explore movement, and we're going to explore very gently throughout this session, just begin to slowly roll your head from one side to the other. And right away, we're going to talk about a very important thing in terms of how we're investigating movement here, because it's an investigation. This is not an exercise. So as you're rolling your head, maybe pause just for a moment, because you've probably been rolling it already, and just ask yourself, how far were you rolling your head in each direction? And was it easier on one side? Now, when you begin again in a moment, I'd like to encourage you to roll your head less than you can and go slow enough that you can feel that there's a moment in rolling the head. As you go away from the center, there's a certain moment where if you're going to keep going, you actually have to increase the effort. It's like you kind of step on the gas, you contract somewhere, more powerfully. So you can kind of push through a resistance that you feel. Okay, but now I'm going to encourage you not to do that. So when you meet that invisible wall somewhere, and you have to be going slowly and gently to notice it, otherwise you'll just crash right through. But if you go slow enough, you'll feel there is a moment where there's some kind of little resistance. Just stop right there, go back to the middle, and then go to the other side. And then connected to the same idea, it's likely that if you're really paying attention and being honest and not pushing through that resistance, there'll be one direction where you go further. So that means when you go to the other side, try to avoid the temptation to push through again, just to make the movement equal to the two sides. If it feels good to you to have an equal movement, make the movement smaller and smaller, even if it's just a fraction of an inch around the midline. Okay. let that go. And that was really just a kind of another checking in movement. It's not even really the heart of the process that we're getting into, but I wanted to really underline this idea that all of the movements that we're going to do, we want to engage in at a minimum of effort. Why? Because when we reduce the amount of effort we're using, it increases our sensitivity. It makes it easier for us to attend to small details of sensation. And that is going to be absolutely crucial if we want to improve our movement, and especially if we're dealing with pain of any kind. Even though in our culture, there's just this strong kind of, attitude of do it, let's get it done. No pain, no gain. We want to take the opposite approach here. Okay, so if you run into that resistance, don't worry, it's not going to be there for all time. But let's just respect our bodies today and stop there and let it go. Okay, so if you had your legs long, please do bend your knees now, stand your feet, and just find a comfortable distance for your feet, somewhere around the width of your shoulders. Make sure that you don't lean the knees together, have the knees over the feet. And bring your attention again to the back of your pelvis. And now begin to gently rock your pelvis up the floor in the direction of your head. So feel how the pressure climbs up towards the top of the sacrum. And again, you don't have to completely press your low back into the floor. Just go in that direction and then release the movement and come back to where you started. And then do the movement again. So you're going to repeat this movement, but please take your time with it and really try to consider each new movement as a fresh start rather than doing reps at the gym, something like that. And if there's any discomfort in the movement, make it smaller. And now just try to broaden your focus now so that even though the instruction that was given was about moving your pelvis, you begin to listen to sensations throughout your body, really from head to toe. Because as you roll your pelvis up the floor, you change the shape of your spine. Feel that you'll flatten the curve in your low back. Just notice how far up your spine do you feel the movement. Is something happening in your chest? Does something happen in your neck? Does your head move? Okay, leave that alone now. Just pause briefly. And then begin to roll your pelvis in the opposite direction, down towards your feet. Again, you don't need to do the largest movement you can do. But go in that direction towards the feet. The low back will lift. But here, also make sure that it's not the low back that is initiating the movement. That's a good formula for misery. So even though the low back arches, see if you can really find the power for this movement down in the region of your groin. Think of lengthening the pubic bone down away from your head and a bit back towards the floor. Again, don't do as much as you can do. Just go gently. And now as you continue, begin to alternate both of these movements. So the pelvis goes down towards your feet and then up towards your head. And once again, listen all along the length of your spine. So notice when you have more space in the low back, and then when the lumbar vertebra move towards the floor. And then pay attention to the same thing behind your neck. When is your neck more arched? When does the curve of your neck flatten a bit and move backwards towards the floor? Can you pay attention to your low back and your neck at the same time? So you can notice, do they arch together? Or does one arch while the other one's flattened? Okay, take a rest here. If you'd like, you can lengthen your legs again on the floor, or you can keep them standing. But in either case, just try to notice if your overall sense of how you relate to the floor has changed at all, just from these few simple movements that you've done. If you do feel that some parts of the body now lie more comfortably on the floor, what this means is that somewhere where you were contracting the musculature kind of just in an ongoing way, you've let go. Because what happens when you move slowly like this and pay close attention, as we're doing, is your nervous system has the opportunity to do a bit of sorting of the effort. What effort is actually meaningful? In other words, it fits the movement that you're carrying out. And what is extra? What is unnecessary? The more you move slowly and really pay attention in this way, the more you can sort that out. And we're not trying to glorify moving slowly or gently, but what we're trying to do here is get that clarity in the body that will actually make it much easier to move powerfully and do all kinds of things later on. So we can think of these gentle movement lessons as kind of a preparation for action, a preparation for moving more powerfully, if that's what we wish to do. Okay, so come back to the same movement now. If your legs were long, stand the feet again, and gently begin to roll the pelvis up the floor and down. And now coordinate these two movements with your breathing. So the pelvis moves one direction as you breathe in, and it goes the other direction as you breathe out. So there's two different ways to do that, of course. Just go with whichever way comes to you most naturally. And just notice what that is. Are you rolling the pelvis up the floor as you inhale? Or are you rolling the pelvis down the floor? Whatever it is, don't change it, but just be very clear with yourself. And your breath, as I was mentioning earlier, is always a very precise indicator of the quality of your action. So if you're over-efforting, the breath is going to be strained. So move in such a way that you can breathe like a baby. You can just breathe very simply. Okay, but now pause for a moment and just remember, what was the coordination you chose? Where did you go on the inhale? Where did you go on the exhale? And now resume the movement, but change the coordination with your breathing. So if you were going up on the inhale, now go down on the inhale. If you were going up on the exhale, now go down on the exhale. This should feel different. You might think that that's a subtle distinction, but what do you do when you breathe in? You fill your lungs. You change the shape of your chest. When you breathe out, you expel all that air. So it's not insignificant. And notice if you actually like one of these two coordinations better. Now, if you're kind of not sure, you can switch back to the first one you chose. But whatever it is, just see if you can notice there really is a distinction. between the two. And the most important distinction that we're looking for is which one seems to require less effort. There probably is one version that is easier for you. But rather than try to instruct you, do it this way, breathe this way, the reason that we use this process of inquiry is because that's what builds the intelligence of your body. That's what builds biological fitness, is that you can begin to make these distinctions for yourself. Okay, so take another rest now. Again, check in with how your relationship to the floor is evolving. And then come back to standing the feet. And you can continue to coordinate the movements with your breathing if you like, or you can just move on whatever timing feels best. But begin to make the movement again. And we're going to ask a different kind of question now. So feel as the pelvis goes up the floor, feel the pressure on the back of your sacrum. And notice, does the pressure go right up the middle? Or does it actually move more to one side? So this is this question about symmetry or asymmetry. And most likely, if you really pay attention, you are making an asymmetrical movement, even though the instruction just says up, down, and there's sort of an implied sense that you go down the middle. But probably you're not going down the middle, and that's fine. Again, please don't change the movement, just zero in on what's happening. But if, in fact, you're moving up the floor and bringing the pressure more to one side of your pelvis, then most likely you're also engaging a little more with one of your two legs. So see if you can feel that as well. So it's important, do not change the movement, but just listen to what's the effort you're making with your left leg, what's the effort you're making with the right leg. Feel how each of your 2 feet engages with the floor. And bring your attention again further up. So when the pelvis goes up, first of all, notice, does your chin move? Hopefully by now, the movement has really translated up the spine to the degree where each time the pelvis goes up the floor, the chin moves up a little bit away from the chest. Okay, but it might be that the head is actually turning slightly to one side. And if you pay attention to your shoulder blades, it could be that one shoulder is moving more clearly towards the floor than the other. So this idea of going up and down, the more we pay attention, we might realize there's a kind of a diagonal happening. Okay, so take a rest now. And you might notice an interesting thing. Even though the movement was essentially the same movement you've been doing all this time, do you now kind of notice something about how the left side of you rests and the right side that might reflect something about what was going on just now? And then we're actually going to exaggerate that. So come back to the movement now. And if you weren't sure, if it really felt like you were going straight up the middle before, that's fine. But this time you are going to deliberately work more with one leg and choose the leg that felt like it was already doing it. So if you recognize the pattern, all you're doing is exaggerating that. But work a little more with the one leg and feel that the pelvis doesn't go straight up towards your head, but it actually angles a little more towards one shoulder. And feel this diagonal movement. It might be a little clearer now that you're doing it purposefully. And feel all along your spine. What's this like? Again, use your breathing to ensure that you're not working harder than you need to. Because again, the improvement that you'll get from these sessions, it's not based on burning calories. You want to do that, that's really good. You need that in your life, but that's not what these sessions are about. These sessions are about clarifying the image of your movement. Okay, and so stop now, and now begin to emphasize the other leg. The leg that was just doing all the work, give it a little vacation. You still have both feet standing, but engage more with the other leg now. Move the pelvis towards the other shoulder. And this movement might feel very strange to you because this is not your habit. Even if you rarely get on the floor and rock your pelvis this way anyways, this pattern that's being asked of you now is a pattern that your body rarely goes into. It's like if you've ever been skiing and you see where the other skiers have been. They leave their tracks, and like sometimes the easiest thing is to just follow the tracks of another skier. Well, you're carving a new path here. So just like in the beginning when we're rolling the head, it's not important that this movement is equal to the last movement you were doing. But if you go gently, you use your breath, and you shift your attention from the leg to the pelvis, and then notice how the movement goes up your spine now to the other shoulder. You're starting to put together a new image. You're expanding your self-image here. And now each time the pelvis rolls up the floor, use one leg more than the other and alternate between left and right. So you're doing the two different movements. And you might feel still that one is clearer, is easier for you than the other. And if that's the case, try to notice where in your body do you feel some resistance on the side that's not as simple. And then if you notice that same part of yourself when you go to the easier side, what's going on there? It could be that there's a contraction on one side that hinders the movement more when you go in that direction. So try to observe those things, because just becoming aware of them will begin to create a change. And now just make the movement really aiming up the middle now. Really go for the midline so that the pelvis rocks directly up towards the head. And the head can be making a similar movement to the pelvis, tilting a little back as the pelvis goes up. The chin coming towards the chest as the pelvis goes down. You can push the belly out a little bit to help with that downward movement. And just see if the center feels clearer to you now than it did in the beginning. Okay, and now take a complete rest. So as you can see, we're pretty much working with one basic movement here over and over. This movement of rolling the pelvis up and down. But the pelvis is the center of your power. And by widening the attention and noticing these other factors like the breathing or the distribution of the work between the two legs, you are beginning to clarify how your center works. And you're doing that by integrating it into the whole. So another principle of ideal movement, which I just mentioned there in regards to the legs, is that in ideal movement, the work is distributed. You have a sense that no one place is really working harder than the other. And it makes sense if you think about it, that if the left leg and the right leg can be a little more equal in the load that they carry, it's going to make the overall feeling a little bit easier. Okay, guess what? We're going to come back to the same movement, but we're going to add in something new this time. So begin to roll the pelvis up and down. And I've mentioned in passing more than once the movement of the head. Hopefully the head is doing the same thing by now as the pelvis, but if not, Just make it a deliberate thing so that the head tilts back as the pelvis rolls up, and then the chin comes down as the pelvis goes down the floor. But really, you shouldn't have to add any effort in your neck to create that movement. The action of the pelvis, if the communication along the length of the spine is clear enough, it should just produce the rolling of the head or the rocking of the head. Okay? But now something you can do to clarify that is that every time the head moves up, look up. And probably the easiest way to do this is actually close the eyes, but think that you're looking up into your forehead. And then when the pelvis goes down and the chin nods down, look straight down, like you're trying to see down to your belly button. So simply put, bring your eyes intentionally into the action. Look up as the pelvis goes up, look down as the pelvis goes down. Great, and take a rest. We're gonna build more layers with this. So when you're ready, return to the movement, incorporating the eyes. And again, I'll suggest that you have the eyes closed, but you could also have the eyes open and you could move the eyes along the ceiling. Actually, I'll change that. I'll say, if you did have the eyes closed, open them. And if you had the eyes open, close them, because this is yet another variation that's important. To look up into your forehead and then to look down the front of your shirt is one thing. And then to track as if you were watching a line being painted up and down the ceiling, that's a different feeling. It's just a shift in the eyes, but you might notice that it changes the overall quality. Okay, now I think the easiest thing for what we're going to do next would be to work with the eyes closed. So if that's okay for you, close the eyes now. Look up into the forehead as the pelvis goes up, and look down as the pelvis goes down. But now we're going to do a process similar to what we did when we noticed the work in the legs. Most people have a dominant eye. So when you look up, do you notice, are you kind of just looking up with one eye more than the other? When you look down, same thing. Which eye seems to be leading this action? So now both of your eyes will probably continue to move, but as if you were looking through a telescope, can you bring your attention to just one eye? Look up, look down as you rock the pelvis, but think that you're just looking through that one eye. And notice how this rearranges the entire movement. You might notice that once again, you seem to also be favoring one leg. Maybe, maybe not, but it could happen. In any case, this is maybe new for some folks to use your attention in this way, but it's extremely valuable. So take a rest and notice now, even though you've been doing this movement the whole time, the same thing with the pelvis, after looking through the one eye for the last minute or two, how do you experience that side of your body on the side where the eye was looking? And how does the other side of your body feel? Most people are going to feel a pretty significant difference between the two sides. If you don't worry about that. But if you do, you might wonder to yourself, for a moment, why is that? And it's because the eyes organize the movement of the entire body. The visual sense is our primary sense. We use it all day long. And if you see better out of one eye, well, that's the eye that you're going to aim at the world, right? But that's going to change the way you hold your head on top of the spine. And the way you hold your head on top of your spine, well, that's going to change your whole posture, isn't it? So you can begin to see the importance of this. And now, like we did with the legs, we're going to explore the non-habitual pattern. So if your legs were long, stand the feet again and resume the action, but now look through the other eye. Once again, this might feel a bit odd to you. Now just bring your attention to your breath to make sure that the effort is within reason. Go easily. Look up as the pelvis rolls up, as the head tilts back, look down. Now using the second eye. Very good. Take a rest. And just notice, do you have a sense of something equalizing a bit more now that you included the other eye? All right. Well, so now we're going to go even deeper with the eyes. And what I would recommend for this portion of the process is that you lengthen your legs on the floor. Now, if that wasn't comfortable at the beginning, it's possible that after what we've done, it would be more comfortable now. But I'll include that caveat. If it's really better for you to keep the feet standing, then go ahead and keep the feet standing. But if you can, lengthen the legs. Okay, and close your eyes. Just allow yourself to quiet down a little bit here. You're not going to be making any movements with the pelvis for a few minutes here. So imagine now that there is a line that is painted down your middle. From the top of your head, down through the middle of your nose, and that little groove above the lips, over your lips, it goes down the middle of your chin. Just imagine that the line is being painted and you're following it with your attention. So then, of course, the line comes down the middle of your throat, keeps going down. Eventually, it comes to the top of your breastbone, and the line is painted slowly down the middle of your breastbone. And then it comes to the bottom, comes down to your navel. And let's say it stops there for now. And then imagine the line is painted upwards. So just retracing the same path up the middle of your belly, up along your breastbone, and then your throat, over your chin, lips, between the nostrils, up through the middle of the nose, passing between your eyes. And then imagine that the stripe is painted all the way along the midline of your head to the floor above your head, and then imagine that the line keeps going up above you. And then the line comes back down over the top of your head. And I'll stop describing exactly where the line is, but you on your own, you imagine the line slowly painting downwards. And this time it's going to keep going. It's not going to stop at your belly button. It's going to keep going eventually between your legs and down to the floor and down off into the distance down below you. But you control the speed here. So eventually, once it's gone all the way down, it's going to come back up again. Now, you might already be tracking this line with your eyes. But if that wasn't happening. Now begin to think that you're following the line with your eyes, you're watching. And just feel the movement of the eyes and the sockets. Make sure, even in this context, that you're not straining. It's possible to strain with the eyes, very possible, especially if you sit in front of a computer screen all day. So make sure, using your breath, that you're not working harder than you need to. And now notice what we were looking at just a couple moments ago when we were doing the pelvic movements. Are you following this line with one eye more than the other? So now, again, just pick the eye that seems to be more natural and follow the movement with that one eye, going up and down. And then before you go to the other eye, just stop completely, take a rest. Notice again, if there's some kind of feeling that you can attribute to that one-sided attention that you were just using. If you pay attention to your eyes themselves, you might have a sense that one eye feels larger than the other or more open than the other. Just there might be a difference in the musculature around the two eyes. And you might even have a different feeling on one side of your face. So compare the two corners of your mouth, feeling in the forehead. Okay, and then go back to what you were doing. You're following this line being painted up and down the middle of you, but use the other eye now. Again, make sure that the breath is flowing as you do this. And see if you can feel that as your eyes move up and down, gradually following this movement of this imaginary line, are you experiencing changes in your neck? Maybe in other parts of your body. Maybe you can feel it further down your spine. Okay, and then bring both eyes back into the movement again. As much as you can, with an equal distribution of work between the two eyes. Very nice. And take a rest. And go back to what you did at the very, very beginning. Just very gently roll your head from side to side. Again, rolling just the amount that's comfortable, but it could be that the head rolls a little more simply now. So just check that and then bring the head back to the middle. And now bend your knees and stand your feet. And one last time, with your eyes, follow the movement of the line all the way up, all the way down, moving very slowly and very gradually. But as you continue, can you now return in a way that doesn't break the feeling of what you've already established with your eyes, but can you begin to, as the eyes go up, the pelvis is slowly, gently rolling up the floor. And as the eyes go down, the pelvis is moving down. But if you stay with what you were doing before the pelvis was involved, the movement of the pelvis should be way slower now than it was in the beginning. So make sure that the eyes don't skip, that the eyes go point by point along this line. But now the eyes are so to speak, the conductor of the orchestra. And you can still feel when you have more space behind your low back or when it's flatter. And you can notice both the participation of your two eyes and the participation of your two legs. And then gradually you can begin to make the movement a little faster. Speed it up gradually to the pace that you had originally. And then, if it feels good to you, go lighter and maybe make a little bit smaller movement, but go a little faster. Up and down and up and down. Make it a little more playful. Very nice. Let that go. Take another rest. Now I'm going to offer you just a few more variations here, but if this feels like enough for you, you could also stop here. And if that's what you do, you'll just want to really take your time coming up from the floor and don't rush into your next activity yet, but take some moments to appreciate the new feeling in your body. But if you'd like to go just one step further, bend your knees, stand your feet, and of course, begin to rock your pelvis up and down now. And bring your attention again to the movement of your head. So the head goes up as the pelvis goes up, the eyes are looking up, the head goes down as the pelvis goes down. But now we're going to reverse that. So as the pelvis goes up, look down and bring your chin towards your chest. And then as the pelvis goes down, look up and bring your chin up away from your chest. So now it's like the pelvis and the head are moving towards and away from each other. And this is a very different feeling through the whole length of your spine. When the pelvis goes down, you can really push the belly out. Again, think of the pubic bone reaching down away from the head and back to the floor. And you'll feel that what the head is doing, it doesn't really feel like it's rocking so much anymore. It's probably rubbing against the back of the floor. It's kind of sliding on the floor. Okay, and now just go back to having the head and the pelvis move together and see how that feels. You might feel a bit refreshed after that opposing movement. Okay, take a rest. I'm going to offer you one more variation with your head. So before you begin moving again, just feel that point on the back of your head that touches the floor. And what you're going to do in a moment, when you begin to rock the pelvis, you're going to continue to look straight forward at the ceiling. And what you're looking for is a sense that you push with that pelvic movement directly up through your spine so that the head is pushed up the floor, but you're always sliding over that same point of contact. So the distance between the chin and the chest will not change, but you just feel that you're sort of rubbing that spot on the back of your head up and down. And what's really nice to feel is how the spine is just kind of shooting up between the shoulder blades. Maybe you can have a little sense of the shoulder blades almost gripping the floor here. And you just feel that the spine moves in between the shoulder blades. Okay, very good. And one last time, just do the basic movement that you've been doing all along. Rock the pelvis up and let the head tilt in the same direction, up and down. Just a few more times. Very nice. Let it all go and take one last final rest on the floor. And while you do, just review the feeling of how you contact the floor. Notice each of your legs, each of your arms, your spine, your head. Take your time, but just notice what's different now compared to the beginning. You feel more symmetrical now? Are there places that previously weren't on the floor that have let go and are now resting into the floor? What's the quality of your breathing now? Okay. So use that quality of breath that you've discovered as a way to continue monitoring the quality of your movement as you now bend your knees and stand your feet again if the legs were long. And you're going to come back up into standing, but take your time. Start by rolling to one side. And all along this process of coming up, just see if you can maintain the same kind of breathing. You might pause in sitting and then eventually maybe come to hands and knees or any way you like to transition up. But if you feel that you have to suddenly grunt and add a bunch of effort, maybe you could find another way. All right. And then just come all the way up and stand again as you did at the beginning. Notice how you are now. How is your weight distributed over the two legs? What's the feeling of how you carry yourself? The length of your spine, the way your head sits on top. What's the quality of your breathing? And then just turn your head to look over one shoulder and then the other. And a similar idea to when you were rolling your head on the floor, but now, of course, your head is free in space, so allow your shoulders to turn, your pelvis. And feel the movement go all the way down to your ankles. And then begin to walk around the room. Do you remember how it felt when you were walking before the lesson? Feeling in your hip joints? How do they move now? And if you enjoy the feeling that you have in walking right now, and especially if this is not how walking normally feels to you, just know it's how walking could feel all the time. And so the key there is just to continue your practice. So I definitely invite you to come back for the next class, Biological Fitness. And thank you for your practice today. So see you again soon.